I started that year with I think there were 16 kids in my intensive group. In November, I started doing Switch It with my group. I joined the academy in February, and then fully started implementing the Reading Simplified model in April. And by the end of that year, I had dwindled my group down to 6 because 10 of them had grown to grade level and could move on out of the intensive groups. She saw some of the stuff that I was doing in my class because last year I was in a room that had no walls. And so everybody saw everything I was doing with my kids, which was another thing. I mean, I did have a lot of exposure with people going, "Oh my gosh, did you walk by Hess's room? See what she's doing with those kids?" And there was just like this buzz around the school, like, what is she doing? So my dear friend Anne-Marie stopped by one day and she said, "Hey, that looks like word work." And I said, "Oh, Switch It." And she goes, "Oh, Switch It. I know what that is." And we started talking about some of the stuff that we were doing together. And she said, "Let's just start doing this and compare notes." So we did. And we loved it so much and saw so much growth, not just in the first grade level, but in other intervention groups that we did, that by the end of the year, all of my first graders, our entire first grade level, we dibble our kids. We're on grade level for their nonsense word fluency. So every single first grader could blend a word and read 13 or whatever in a minute. That had never been done before. And we realized something was so impactful and so powerful. Anne-Marie and I presented our stuff to the rest of our staff. Every single person said, "I will try anything at this point," because our kids, our readers are some of the lowest in our district. We have a fairly large district.
We have taken our data every year. We use our data weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and we've always known what the data is, but we've always had the same things to try and fix the data. And it never truly fixes itself. I would get up to MOY testing for middle of year dibbles and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, please let them have grown. Please let them have grown." And then we'd do the same thing at EOY. Like, "I sure hope they've grown. Like, we think we're doing the right thing." And then we would see just minimal growth or we'd see drops and we weren't really sure why. And we were looking at our data all the time. And so I think when I had teachers taking the CDE read plan or the read class through CDE, and finally, one of my teachers, Tara Hess, was like, "I've got to do more. I've got to do more. I've got to find more for my students. Like, this is not working in first grade." And that is when she found Reading Simplified. And my instructional coach walked by her room one day because we are an open concept building, so she could walk right by and see what was going on. And she was like, "Hey, I'm doing that too." And so they were doing very similar things that they had received from the Reading Simplified. And that was before they had even joined the academy. And so we're able to really know our data, but we also know how we're going to fix it because we've pinpointed exactly what kids need. And now we can move through a pathway and speed up the progress besides just assuming that multisyllabic work is enough when they have phonics holes still to fill, and we didn't know how to fill those phonics holes in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. They started using it, and then I went in to observe one day and I was like, "Oh, what is this? I've never seen this before." And it was in 1st grade, and Tara was teaching 1st grade at the time, and she was like, "Let me show you the growth that I'm starting to see." And it was that instant, like, kids are starting to get somewhere. And that was probably early February of last year in 1st grade. And, it was like, "Okay, let's just keep going. I trust what you're doing. Let's see if it works." Because obviously what we've been doing hasn't been working. We've been getting red kids and green kids. And what we want is readers. All kids deserve to be able to read. And so I told her, I said, "You keep going. Let's see what it does. It's not going to harm us any more than what we're already doing," right? And we were able to look and really get the excitement going once her data continued to grow. And that's when we started taking on more, and we were able to share it with our teachers. And what we did was we shared it with a small group of teachers, and we started with the data. We said, "Look at how exciting this is. Look at the growth, and let's do a make and take workshop." And we did some make and take stuff so that they could get excited and they could try it to really build that momentum. Because it came from teachers, it made a huge difference. If it comes from me, it feels like a mandate. But when teachers start doing it and they're seeing results and they can share the results and they can share their excitement with other teachers, you start to really feel that buzz in the building. We took a small group of staff, and it was our staff who had our significantly below grade level students in their reading targeted instruction, or what we now call personalized learning. And I think there was 6 of them. And we also took on the staff that I knew would jump in feet first and say, okay, let's try it at least. Like, I'm not overwhelmed right now. Let's try it. It's not going to harm us. And then they were so excited about it. Then we decided, okay, we're going to do a summer PD one day. It's going to be informational. They're going to learn some of the activities. We're going to sign them up for the Reading Academy. We're going to pay for that. We got a grant to pay for that. And we're going to do some make and take that day too, so that they feel like they're ready to start the school year. And my biggest thing is teachers have so much on their plates. I never want to add more or feel like something is overwhelming, because then they'll start to resent it. And so my biggest thing was, let's give them money. We paid them to come. We paid for the academy. They all showed up. It was optional. It was off contract, and every single staff member showed up. And that's huge. And knowing that we were going to use this program K-5 and really systematize it for Meeker and our kids made a huge difference. Because if I only had one teacher at each grade level do it, I wouldn't have been able to say everyone has an impact. But we have to all have an impact in order to move all of our kids. So we were using a program where we were doing more of a direct instruction reading program that we had used for 7 years in the district. And what we were seeing consistently, and because it was a kinder and first grade program only, so we were seeing students who were benchmark and they would stay benchmark. And then we were seeing students who were below benchmark and they were never moving. And we had pulled the data in February of last year, and I had said, okay, let's look at kids in K through 5th grade and students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Let's look at all their previous data. Well, students who had turned red or were below benchmark after, even if they were above benchmark in K1, if they were somehow below benchmark in 2nd grade, they were below benchmark for the rest of their life in elementary school. So that means they were struggling to read in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and we were never catching them up. We had the data, we had dibbles for kindergarten through 5th, but we were never moving them. They were just consistently below grade level. And so when I pulled that up, I thought, okay, we've got to do something. Something's got to change. And Tara was seeing growth in her students with their nonsense words, so correct letter sounds and whole words read. So kids were growing in spots where we hadn't really seen them grow before. Like, we've always said, don't practice nonsense words, don't practice nonsense words, don't send it home for homework. But we weren't really sure why or why not, right? We weren't seeing growth either way, so it didn't really matter, it didn't feel like. But she was starting to see that growth, and she had a small group of about 13 kids, I think, and it kept shrinking because they kept growing. And that was just within a few months' time. But when we started to see growth in nonsense words and correct letter sounds and whole words, and then we started to see growth in DORF, so then their fluency was growing, that's when we started to see, okay, this is making a difference, and we're closing their holes. We had a phonics benchmark assessment that we used in 1st grade. It was done in December and in May, and we were able to see the growth there because they finally knew their consonants and their letter names and their letter sounds, and like, we were able to see some of the growth and some of the skills that we were never growing in before. Probably between 90 to 95% of our staff who was trained and was part of the Reading Simplified Academy came to those, and sometimes it was just different after school activities that got in the way, but 95% most of the time, if not 100% in some of them. So we offered those for an hour and a half, a few after school times with Marnie, and we were able to really build in just more knowledge. And now that they have tried it, now what questions do you have? And you're going through the academy, and we expect you to be this far into the academy. And about 3 months in, I told him, I said, okay, now that you've started, I'll pay you. I'll pay you to do the academy. I'll pay you with your time. Your time is worthwhile. So I paid them 6 hours of additional pay because they were doing the academy outside of the school day, outside of contract time. And again, this was all optional, but the buy-in was there. And some of that comes with staff culture and that buy-in of, like, I truly believe 95% of kids are going to be able to learn how to read. And that's the belief here at Meeker, is that we can get there. But we offered, not only gave them access to the academy, but then we offered the after school. Anne Marie, my instructional coach, takes about 1 day a month and goes and observes specifically in and gives feedback on what's going on in our personalized learning time. My assistant principal and I are in weekly or bi-weekly to every classroom and giving feedback, and that's not always personalized learning time, but we try and hit that about every other week. And then we look at the data monthly as a staff, and we look at, okay, where are kids in each group? What's the data show? And we learned early in the year that they're not maybe as good at looking at data as I thought they would be to go deep enough. Like, we've always looked at surface level data. So we dug deeper, and now they know how to look at it. They know how to look at the pathway. They know how to say, this is what my kids need. This is where they are. This is where I'm going to be by the end of the year. And then about January, we took on the most pressing need and looked at that piece, because that took us even deeper into the data. And so we've just gotten better and better, but it's because the buy-in is there and they are seeing kids move, and that's been huge. One of my teachers said, she's like, I used to hate TI, personalized learning time. Like, it was my least favorite part of the day because I was doing the same thing and no one was growing. And now it's her favorite part of the day. She has a small group, her kids are moving, she's seeing progress. We're seeing students' composite scores double, if not triple, from beginning of year to end of year. And even though they may not be, they were red, below grade level, and now they're almost below grade level. Like, they're growing so much that the teachers are like, okay, I can do this. I'm excited to do this. I want to learn more. And there's extra webinars that you offer. And I told them a few weeks ago, I said, if you want to do one of those, I'll pay you for your time. Like, just continue to learn. And our biggest leverage for students to move is staff, right? And we have to have the staff that want to do it and that truly believe all kids can learn how to read. And I've never had a staff like that until this year at Meeker. And they are really, really willing to say, okay, I'm going to learn more, because the more I learn about, then the more my kids can continue to learn. And I think that's been a huge benefit of the Academy, is that we can continue to learn. It's not just a one and done PD. We continue to learn, and that's been huge for our students. We have to look at gains and data as each individual measure, right? We have some students who started off with well below composite scores, well below door scores. Like, they were reading 14, 15 words a minute in third grade. And we are currently doing some of our end of year testing. And though one student who was reading 14 or 15 words at the beginning of the year today read 69, right? And like, though she's still going to show up as below benchmark, no one's going to turn that away as not making growth. Like, we are seeing huge gains. And I think what we'll see overall is not only will we see gains this year, we will see huge gains in the fall where we hold our students. We're used to dropping about 10 to 15% benchmark every spring to fall, which means we know kids go home and they don't always read over the summer. Kids go home and they don't practice, but they have the skills now to hold. So I think what we saw last year from spring to fall with our first grade group that had Miss Hess and Miss Hagan, they did not drop at all. They stayed the same from spring to fall. I think we're going to see that same thing this year from spring to fall, that though we may not have hit everyone at benchmark or 95% of our kids at benchmark, we're going to be close to, as a building, probably around 80%, which is huge. And then we're going to continue to grow that next year. On a typical year, I would say we're probably K3, between kindergarten and third grade, we're probably at about 65 to 70%. Meeker was at, overall, I would say 63%, I think, 2 years ago. And then last year, I think we were maybe at 65%. So we're significantly above where we've been. And our goal really over the next 2 years is to continue to cut down students who are not reading at grade level. Because again, they all deserved to be able to read. That's that basic human right. Like, they deserve to be able to read. We're going to cut down on those who can't and give them the skills so that they can. They're so excited to read. They can read, right? We're sending, and Anne-Marie, my instructional coach, said it best the other day. She's like, even if they're not at benchmark yet, we're sending kids to the next grade level who are readers. They want to read. They are okay reading in class. They're okay reading grade level material. And we haven't had that before. I have a third grade class sitting at 32 read plans in the state of Colorado. That means they're significantly reading deficient. So 32 out of 78 kids, that's significant. And our goal next year is to cut down 50% of our read plans at least, right? Like that's bare minimum. But we're finally sending kids to the next grade level who can read. And that's what they need. They need to be able to read to do all the things that they want to do. Sometimes it's just a change in mindset because of the change in philosophy, right? Like when we start to shift philosophies and we start to change what we've done for so long, we have to really think about why. And when we go back to the data and say, okay, we weren't moving kids like they deserved to be moved, then we start to say, okay, what is that mindset shift? And the learning and the continuous learning is what helps. And we do the same thing with students. We don't just teach them once and then expect them to put it into place and be totally fine. We do that all the time with PD in education. In education, you get a PD for one day, and then it just kind of goes by the wayside and no one checks in, or you might check in every once in a while with it, but it's not consistent, and it's not consistent learning. And so really to combat that, we did some of the academy. We did the weekly or the monthly check-ins. I meet with my teachers weekly so they can ask questions about anything at all. But a lot of times we'd bring up PL and we look at data, and then we have the monthly data teams where we look at our tier 2 data. And so it was just this consistent cycle of improvement versus this one and done, like you have to be done. And the one thing I appreciate about the academy is, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to learn it. Now go try it. And now come back. Now learn this and try it and come back. And let's talk about, or in those discussion boards, like how did this go and what questions do you have? And I think that's what helped on those monthly check-ins with you as well, is like what else and what more? Because we had questions, but when you just do a PD and it just goes, you can't ask those questions to anybody. And I think we really have found something that works well, and it's been a huge focus, and we've been able to grow our teachers. If we talk about just the buy-in is huge, but I think that buy-in comes from the principal's office. It starts there. And as an instructional leader, my job is to ensure that all of our kids are learning. And when they're not, I have to make some difficult decisions. And sometimes those difficult decisions are financial decisions, but there's always money. I point that out to people a lot. Like there is money. But what are you willing to spend your money on? And if you're not willing to go, we got a grant to pay for a large majority of it. We've used our district funds, our school-based budget to buy decodables. Like we are willing to go that extra step because we know that it makes a difference. But as an instructional leader, I also know the data. And if the data is not there, then we have to do something about it. I'm tired of hearing about the pandemic and the impact it's had on kids because we have had them back for 2 years. And if we haven't been able to make a change, I have my third graders, 28 of them were online in first grade. My own personal third grader has been in 2 districts because I moved her back into my building during the pandemic because I knew she needed to be in school. But I can't allow that pandemic to be the reason that these kids don't succeed in life, and why I cannot send them to middle school not reading just because they went to elementary school during a pandemic. We had to do something. And I think I just get really tired of, and I know it's a great excuse, and it is the reason why we're significantly behind, but that means we have to do something about it. We can't just continue to use this as that platform of these kids. They were in kindergarten and first during the pandemic. So some of the most important years of their career in elementary school, learning how to read, we can't just say, well, these kids are just not going to be readers, because we haven't had readers since before the pandemic. Like our data really didn't shift much because we were in school mostly during the pandemic. So our data hasn't shifted that much.
It has changed everything about our school, our culture, the confidence in our students. It is such a different dynamic in our school this year than it has been before. And we've got kids who they just want to do it because they want to learn, and they're finding out that they can learn more when they can read. I'll just share this last bit of information because we all are just like, we want to cry when we see it. We use DIBELS as our measurement, and we did our mid-year benchmarks last year for kindergartners who have never been exposed to any type of curriculum. When we look at their scores and normed against the national average, 90% of our kinders are performing at or above grade level, all because we do Reading Simplified. That is the only difference between us and the other schools in our district and across the country. And we look at that and we're like, I can't wait to have those kinders when I'm a second grade teacher for them. It's mind-blowing how much this has changed the lives